But hello everyone.
Hi, Lorraine.
Glad to be here this week.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jilly.
Hello.
Hey guys, it's Shildy.
Hi, Hildy.
Hello.
I love this chapter, really excited about it.
Oh, this is perfect. It's funny.
Who'd like to kick off with the reading?
I'll go first.
Thanks.
Accurate analysis of over 25,000 men and women who had experienced failure disclosed the fact that lack of decision was near the head of the list of 30 major causes of failure. This is no mere statement of a theory, it is a fact. Procrastination, the opposite of decision, is a common enemy which practically every man must conquer. You will have an opportunity to test your capacity to reach quick and definite decisions when you finish reading this book, and are ready to begin putting into action the principles which it describes. Analysis of several hundred people who had accumulated fortunes well beyond the $1 million mark disclosed the fact that every one of them had the habit of reaching decisions promptly and of changing these decisions slowly. If and when they were changed, people who failed to accumulate money, without exception, have the habit of reaching decisions, if at all, very slowly, and of changing these decisions quickly and often. One of Henry Ford's most outstanding qualities in his habit of reaching decisions quickly and definitely, and changing them slowly. This quality is so pronounced in Mr. Ford that it has given him the reputation of being obstinate. It was this quality which prompted Mr. Ford to continue to manufacture his famous Model T, the world's ugliest car, when all of his advisors and many of the purchasers of the car were urging him to change it. Perhaps Mr. Ford delayed too long in making the change, but the other side of the story is that Mr. Ford's firmness of decision yielded a huge fortune before the change in the model became necessary. There is but little doubt that Mr. Ford's habit of definiteness of decision assumes proportion of obstinacy. But this quality is preferable to slowness in reaching decisions and quickness in changing them. The majority of people who fail to accumulate money sufficient for their needs are generally easily influenced by the opinions of others. They permit the newspapers and the gossiping neighbors to do their thinking for them. Opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. Everyone has a flock of opinions ready to be wished upon anyone who will accept them. If you are influenced by opinions, when you reach decisions, you will not succeed in any undertaking, much less that of transmuting your own desire into money. If you are influenced by the opinions of others, you will have no desire of your own. Keep your own counsel. When you begin to put into practice the principles described here, by reaching your own decisions and following them, take no one into your confidence except the members of your mastermind group, and be very sure in your selection of this group that you choose only those who will be in complete sympathy and harmony with your purpose. Close friends and relatives, while not meaning to do so, often handicap one through opinions and sometimes through ridicule, which is meant to be humorous. Thousands of men and women carry inferiority complexes with them all through life because some well-meaning but ignorant person destroyed their confidence through opinions or ridicule. You have a brain and a mind of your own. Use it and reach your own decisions. If you need facts or information from other people to enable you to reach decisions, as you probably will in many instances, acquire these facts or secure the information you need quietly without disclosing your purpose. It is characteristic of people who have but a smattering or a veneer of knowledge to try to give the impression that they have much knowledge. Such people generally do too much talking and too little listening. Keep your eyes and ears open wide and your mouth closed. If you wish to acquire the habit of prompt decision, those who talk too much do too little else. If you talk more than you listen, you not only deprive yourself of many opportunities to accumulate useful knowledge, but you also disclose your plans and purposes to people who will take great delight in defeating you. Basically, they envy you. Remember also that every time you open your mouth in the presence of a person who has an abundance of knowledge, you display to that person your exact stock of knowledge, or your lack of it. Genuine wisdom is usually conspicuous through modesty and silence. Keep in mind the fact that every person with whom you associate is, like yourself, seeking the opportunity to accumulate money if you talk about your plans too freely. You may be surprised when you learn that some other person has beaten you to your goal by putting into action ahead of you the plans of which you talk unwisely. Anyone else like to take over? Volume 96.
I can take over. It's Cheryl here. Let one of your first decisions be to keep a closed mouth and open ears and eyes. As a reminder to yourself to follow this advice, it will be helpful if you copy the following epigram in large letters and place it where you will see it daily. Tell the world what you intend to do, but first show it. This is the equivalent of saying that deeds and not words are what count most. Freedom or death on a decision. The value of decisions depends upon the courage required to render them. The great decisions, which served as the foundation of civilization, were reached by assuming great risks, which often meant the possibility of death. Lincoln's decision to issue his famous Proclamation of Emancipation, which gave freedom to the colored people of America, was rendered with full understanding that his act would turn thousands of friends and political supporters against him. He knew, too, that the carrying out of that proclamation would mean death to thousands of men on the battlefield. In the end, it cost Lincoln his life. That required courage. Socrates' decision to drink the cup of poison rather than compromise in his personal belief was a decision of courage. It turned time ahead 1,000 years and gave to people then unborn the right to freedom of thought and speech. The decision of General Robert E. Lee, when he came to the parting of the way with the Union and took up with the cause of the South, was a decision of courage, for he well knew that it might cost him his own life, that it would surely cost the lives of others. But the greatest decision of all time, as far as any American citizen is concerned, was reached in Philadelphia, July 4th, 1776, when 56 men signed their names to a document which they well knew would bring freedom to all Americas or leave every one of the 56 hanging from the gallows. You have heard of this famous document, but you may not have drawn from it the great lesson in personal achievement it so plainly taught. We all remember the date of this momentous decision, but few of us realize what courage that decision required. Remember our history as it was taught. We remember dates and the names of the men who fought. We remember Valley Forge and Yorktown. We remember George Washington and Lord Cornwallis, but we know little of the real forces back of these names, dates, and places. We know still less of that intangible power which ensured us freedom long before Washington's armies reached Yorktown. Would somebody mind taking over for me? I've got to talk to my son. Thank you.
Someone like to go next?
Imagine that George Washington was the father of our country, that it was he who won our freedom, while the truth is Washington was only an accessory after the fact, because victory for his armies had been ensured long before Lord Cornwallis surrendered. This is not intended to rob Washington of any of the glory he so richly merited. Its purpose, rather, is to give greater attention to the astounding power that was the real cause of his victory. It is nothing short of tragedy that the writers of history have missed entirely even the slightest reference to the irresistible power which gave birth and freedom to the nation destined to set up new standards of independence for all the peoples of the earth. I say it is a tragedy because it is the self-same power which must be used by every individual who surmounts the difficulties of life and forces life to pay the price asked. Let us briefly review the events which gave birth to this power. The story begins with an incident in Boston, March 5th, 1770. British soldiers were patrolling the streets, by their presence openly threatening the citizens. The colonists resented armed men marching in their midst. They began to express their resentment openly, hurling stones as well as epithets at the marching soldiers, until the commanding officer gave orders: "Fix bayonets, charge." The battle was on. It resulted in the death and injury of many. The incident aroused such resentment that the provincial assembly, made up of prominent colonists, called a meeting for the purpose of taking definite action. Two of the members of that assembly were John Hancock and Samuel Adams. Long live their names. They spoke up courageously and declared that a move must be made to eject all British soldiers from Boston. Remember, this a decision in the minds of two men might properly be called beginning of the freedom which we of the United States now enjoy. Remember, too, that the decision of these two men called for faith and courage because it was dangerous. Before the assembly adjourned, Samuel Adams was appointed to call on the governor of the province, Hutchinson, and demand the withdrawal of the British troops. The request was granted, the troops were removed from Boston, but the incident was not closed. It had caused a situation destined to change the entire trend of civilization. Strange, is it not, how the great changes, such as the American Revolution and the World War, often have the beginnings in circumstances which seem unimportant. It is interesting also to observe that these important changes usually begin in the form of a definite decision in the minds of a relatively small number of people. Few of us know the history of our country well enough to realize that John Hancock, Samuel Adams, and Richard Henry Lee of the province of Virginia were the real fathers of our country. Richard Henry Lee became an important factor in the story by reason of the fact that he and Samuel Adams communicated frequently by correspondence, sharing freely their fears and their hopes concerning the welfare of the people of their provinces. From this practice, Adams conceived the idea that a mutual exchange of letters between the 13 colonies might help to bring about the coordination of efforts so badly needed in connection with the solution of their problems. 2 years after the clash with the soldiers in Boston, March 72, Adams presented this idea to the Assembly in the form of a motion that a correspondence committee be established among the colonies, with definitely appointed correspondents in each colony, for the purpose of friendly cooperation for the betterment of the colonies of British America. Would somebody else like to pick up?
Nobody else wants a turn. I'll take another turn.
Thanks, Callie.
What
I
line?
can read if you want.
Thanks, Hildy.
Should I? Or Callie, do you want?
No, go ahead, Hildy. You haven't had a turn yet. Go ahead.
Okay. Mark well this incident. It was the beginning of the organization of the far-flung power destined to give freedom to you and to me. The mastermind had already been organized. It consisted of Adams, Lee, and Hancock. I tell you further that if two of you agree upon the earth concerning anything for which you ask, it will come to you from my Father who is in heaven. The committee of correspondence was organized. Observe that this move provided the way for increasing the power of the mastermind by adding it to men from all the colonies. Take notice that this procedure constituted the first organized planning of the disgruntled colonists. The union there is strength. The citizens of the colonies had been waging disorganized warfare against the British soldiers through incidents similar to the Boston riot, but nothing of benefit had been accomplished. Their individual grievances had not been consolidated under one mastermind. No group of individuals had put their hearts, minds, souls, and bodies together in one definite decision to settle their difficulty with the British once and for all, until Adams, Hancock, and Lee got together. Meanwhile, the British were not idle. They too were doing some planning and masterminding on their own account, with the advantage of having back of them money and organized soldiery. The Crown appointed Gage to supplant Hutchinson as the governor of Massachusetts. One of the new governor's first acts was to send a messenger to call on Samuel Adams for the purpose of endeavoring to stop his opposition by fear. We can best understand the spirit of what happened by quoting the conversation between Colonel Felton, the messenger sent by Gage, and Adams. Call Felton, I have been authorized by Governor Gage to assure you, Mr. Adams, that Governor has been empowered to confer upon you such benefits as would be satisfactory. Endeavor to win Adams by promise of bribes, upon the condition that you engage to cease in your opposition to the measures of the government. It is the governor's advice to you, sir, not to incur the further displeasure of His Majesty. Your conduct has been such as makes you liable to penalties of an amount of Henry the Eighth, by which persons can be sent to England for trial for treason or misprision of treason at the discretion of a governor of a province. But by changing your political course, you will not only receive great personal advantages, but you will make your peace with the king. Anyone wants to read?
I can finish my turn. He was just calling for money. That didn't take long. Samuel Adams had the choice of two decisions. He could cease his opposition and receive personal bribes, or he could continue and run the risk of being hanged. Clearly, the time had come when Adams was forced to reach instantly a decision which could have cost his life. The majority of men would have found it difficult to reach such a decision. The majority would have sent back an evasive reply, but not Adams. He insisted upon Colonel Fenton's word of honor that the colonel would deliver to the governor the answer exactly as Adams would give it to him. Adams' answer, then you may tell Governor Gage that I trust I have long since made my peace with the King of Kings. No personal consideration shall induce me to abandon the righteous cause of my country. And tell Governor Gage it is the advice of Samuel Adams to him no longer to insult the feelings of an exasperated people. Comment as to the character of this man seems unnecessary. It must be obvious to all who read this astounding message that its sender possessed loyalty of the highest order. This is important. Racketeers and dishonest politicians have prostituted the honor for which such men as Adams died. When Governor Gage received Adams' caustic reply, he flew into a rage and issued a proclamation which read, "I do hereby, in His Majesty's name, offer and promise His most gracious pardon to all persons who shall forthwith lay down their arms and return to the duties of peaceable subjects, excepting only from the benefit of such pardon Samuel Adams and John Hancock, whose offenses are too, whatever that is, flagitious a nature to admit of any other consideration but that of condign punishment." As one might say in modern slang, Adams and Hancock were on the spot. The threat of the irate governor forced the two men to reach another decision equally as dangerous. They hurriedly called a secret meeting of their staunchest followers. Here the mastermind began to take on momentum. After the meeting had been called to order, Adams locked the door, placed the key in his pocket, and informed all present that it was imperative that a Congress of the colonists be organized, and that no man should leave the room until the decision for such a Congress had been reached. Great excitement followed. Some weighed the possible consequences of such radicalism, old man fear. Some expressed grave doubt as to the wisdom of so definite a decision in defiance to the Crown. Locked in that room were two men immune to fear, blind to the possibility of failure, Hancock and Adams. Through the influence of their minds, the others were induced to agree that, through the Correspondence Committee, arrangements should be made for a meeting of the First Continental Congress to be held in Philadelphia, September 5th, 1774. Remember this date. It is more important than July the 4th, 1776. If there had been no decision to hold a Continental Congress, there could have been no signing of the Declaration of Independence. Before the first meeting of the new Congress, another leader in a different section of the country was deep in the throes of publishing a summer review of the rights of British America. He was Thomas Jefferson of the province of Virginia, whose relationship to Lord Dunmore, representative of the Crown in Virginia, was as strained as that of Hancock and Adams with their governor. Does somebody else want to take over, seeing as I'm getting tongue-tied?
Who'd like to read?
Let's have a newbie read. Somebody hasn't had a turn reading yet.
I'll have a turn. We're on 343, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shortly after his famous Summary of Rights was published, Jefferson was informed that he was subject to prosecution for high treason against the Majesty's government. Inspired by the threat, one of Jefferson's colleagues, Patrick Henry, boldly spoke his mind, concluding his remarks with the sentence which shall remain forever in a classic: "If this be treason, then make the most of it." It was such men as these who, without power, without authority, without military strength, without money, sat in solemn consideration of the destiny of the colonies. Beginning at the opening of the First Continental Congress and continuing at intervals of 2 years until on June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee arose, addressed the chair, and to the startled assembly made this motion. Gentlemen, I make the motion, excuse me, that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they be absolved from all allegiance with the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Lee's astounding motion was discussed fervently. and at such length that he began to lose patience. Finally, after days of argument, he again took the floor and declared in a clear, firm voice, "My President, we have discussed this issue for days. It is the only course for us to follow. Why then, sir, do we longer delay? Why still deliberate? Let this happy day give birth to an American republic. Let her rise, not to devastate and to conquer, but to re-establish the reign of peace and of law. The eyes of Europe were fixed upon us. She demands us a living example of freedom, and that may exhibit a contrast in the felicity of the citizen to the ever-increasing tyranny." Before his motion was finally voted upon, Lee was called back to Virginia because of serious family illness. But before leaving, he placed his cause in the hands of his friend Thomas Jefferson, who promised to fight until a favourable action was taken. Shortly thereafter, the President of Congress, Hancock, appointed Jefferson his chairman of the committee to draw up a Declaration of Independence. Long and hard, the committee laboured on a document which would mean, when accepted by the Congress, that every man who signed it would be signing his own death warrant, should the colonies lose the fight with Great Britain, which was sure to follow. The document was drawn, and on June 28, the original draft was read before the Congress. For several days it was discussed, altered, and made ready. On July 4, 1776, Thomas Jefferson stood before the Assembly and fearlessly read the most momentous decision ever placed upon paper. When in the course of human events it's necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. When Jefferson finished, the document was voted upon, accepted, and signed by the 56 men, everyone staking his whole life upon the decision to write his name. By that decision came into existence a nation destined to bring to mankind forever the privilege of making decisions. By decisions made in a similar spirit of faith, and only by such decisions, can men solve their personal problems and win for themselves high estates of material and spiritual wealth. Let us not forget this. Analyse the events which led to the Declaration of Independence, and be convinced that this nation, which now holds a position of commanding respect and power among all nations of the world, was born of a decision created by a mastermind, consisting of 56 men. Note well the fact that it was their decision which ensured the success of Washington's armies, because the spirit of that decision was in the heart of every soldier who fought with him, and served as a spiritual power which recognises no such thing as failure. Someone else like to pick up?
I'll go. This is Maggie. I got lost for so long. I got anyway.
Thanks, Maggie.
Found my place. Oh goodness. Note also, with great personal benefit, that the power which gave this nation its freedom is the same power that must be used by every individual who becomes self-determining. This power is made up of the principles described in this book. It will not be difficult to detect in the story of the Declaration of Independence. At least 6 of these principles: desire, decision, faith, persistence, the mastermind, and organized planning. Throughout this philosophy will be found the suggestions that thought, backed by the strong desire, has a tendency to transmute itself into physical equivalent. Before passing on, I wish to leave with you the suggestion that one might find in this story, and in the story of the organization of the United States Steel Corporation, a perfect description of the method by which thought makes this astounding transformation. In your search for the secret of the method, do not look for a miracle, because you will not find it. You will find only the eternal laws of nature. These laws are available to every person who has the faith and the courage to use them. They may be used to bring freedom to a nation or to accumulate riches. There is no charge save the time necessary to understand the and appreciate them. Those who reach decisions promptly and definitely know that they want and generally get it. Know what they want and generally get it. The leaders in every walk of life decide quickly and firmly. That is the major reason why they are leaders. The world has the habit of making room for the man whose words and actions show that he knows where he is going. Indecision is a habit which usually begins in youth. The habit takes on permanency as the youth goes through grade school, high school, and even through college without definiteness of purpose. The major weakness of all educational systems is that neither teach nor encourage the habit of definite decision. It would be beneficial if no college would permit the enrollment of any student unless and until the student declared his major purpose what is that word? Well, I can't. Anyway.
Matriculate.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's like my tongue got tied. Okay, would be of still greater benefit if every student who enters the graded schools were compelled to accept training in the habit of decision and forced to pass a satisfactory examination on the subject before being permitted to advance in the grades. The habit of indecision acquired because of the deficiencies of our school system goes with the student into the occupation he chooses, if in fact he chooses his occupation. Generally, the youth just out of school seeks any job that he can find. He takes the first place he finds because he has fallen into the habit of indecision. 98 out of every 100 people working for wages today are in the positions they hold because they lack the definiteness of decision to plan a definite position and the knowledge of how to choose an employer. Definiteness of decision always requires courage, sometimes very great courage. The 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence staked their lives on the decision to affix their signatures to that document. The person who reaches a definite decision to produce the particular job and make life pay the price he asks does not stake his life on that decision. He stakes his economic freedom, financial independence, riches. Desirable business and professional positions are not within reach of the person who neglects or refuses to expect, plan, and demand these things. The person who desires riches in the same spirit that Samuel Adams desired freedom for the colonies is sure to accumulate wealth. In the chapter on organized planning, you will find complete instructions for making every type of personal services. You will find, oh my gosh, my phone just all of a sudden decided to talk. You will find also detailed information on how to choose the employer you prefer and the particular job you desire. These instructions will be of no value to you unless you definitely decide to organize them into a plan of action.
I've just unmuted everyone so we can talk about this chapter. It's a bit of a tongue tire, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
I must say I didn't really learn very much about American history at school here in Australia, but I did know a little bit about it, and I hadn't really put it down to the decision of those men way back in the beginning, and even the idea of the first initial correspondence to begin occurring is where it really sprang from. And Napoleon Hill always talks about everything comes from an idea, and I just really enjoyed seeing how it flowed right through to the end there with their definite decision and the outcome. I hadn't really thought of it that way.
Yeah, I was surprised that I wasn't quite that aware about the different date there. On the 6th of 1974. you know, why they chose July 4th instead of September 5th, you know, for the definite decision of the declaration.
I actually couldn't hear a lot of what you said, Callie, so I can't comment.
Can you say that again, Kelly?
Sure. Where it talks about the, let's see, was it on line 328, 330?
September the 5th and July the 4th?
Yes. Yeah, where it says that the first Continental Congress to be held in Philadelphia, September 5th, 1774, and they chose the most important date to be July 4th in 1976. I can understand that there's a 2-year difference there, but I'm surprised that they chose July 4th as opposed to September 5th, since that was such a significant first start.
I think that probably has to do with the fact that that was the day that it was made official, whereas because we're talking about decision, if the decision hadn't have occurred, the rest of it wouldn't have occurred. So I think it's the importance of of making decisions that he's trying to emphasize there.
Okay.
Well, September of 74 was the first meeting of the Congress. And July 4th, 1776 was when the Declaration of Independence was finally published. It took 2 years just to decide for independence and to write the document.
Yeah, so the important date really is the date the decision was made, right, to proceed. And July 4th was just merely the date that it finally became official, right?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think what this chapter is trying to teach us is that if we can hold the image in our minds and make the decision, then it's already done. Doesn't matter when it'll come, because it's already done through the decision.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I also like the point how all of the different colonies were in their own way trying to do something for themselves, but when they all came together and had some organised planning that they really made moves forward to what they wanted.
Right, yeah, he seems to place quite a bit of importance on that, the organized planning.
Well, he also, I think, the thing that was really stood out for me, and it's something that even Bob Proctor mentions, is when you're making a decision to move forward, you know, these guys did this with their life depended upon it. And, you know, one of the things that in our decision that we're making is probably not as drastic as what they were going through, but one of the things that I was just picking up from Bob while I was listening to some things on him, he says, you're trading your life for something anyway. You know, in our own life, as we're making decisions, and are we, you know, how, you know, what are we trading our life for? And you know, that's the kind of thing that stood out for me as far as is the decision making. I mean, they believed in what they were doing so strongly that they were willing to risk their physical life for it. Pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. Actually, I was thinking about that point as well, Maggie, towards the end there on starting at about line 486, he's talking about how we do stake a lot of risks on making the decision, but really what we are staking is all of the things that we would give up if we didn't make that decision.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Strong conviction.
And we're just staking our economic freedom on our decisions, right? Not our lives.
Yeah.
But there is an economic freedom to be thought about, right? There's something to be said with that phrase. That we have to make a decision if we want to enjoy economic freedom.
Yeah.
Well, but the time we spend doing what we do is our lives. So we are staking our lives. So are we doing something that's fun to do, or are we doing something for the money?
Or are we doing busy work
Yeah.
and not doing anything really productive to move us towards our goals?
Yes, because those would be 8 hours a day of my life sitting in a cubicle. That is staking my life.
That's an interesting point.
It is, because that's time freedom, isn't it? And time, really, when it comes down to it, that's the biggest commodity that we have.
Yeah.
And I think we have to kind of figure out what does freedom mean for each of us. What is that for us? And time is really a big thing for a lot of people. And if it's, sometimes you're trading time for dollars, sometimes you're trading dollars for time, whatever. But, when making decisions, I also think that beyond just our financial welfare is our personal lives, our relationships, our health, all of those little things that we could, we have to decide, what we put, even if we were looking at health-wise, just as an example, what we put in our body today on a continuous basis, how is that going to affect our life later on down the road? I mean, is that going to cause disease, or is it going to cause, are we banking more on the health part of it? So when we buy, when we make decisions about our diet or our health, those are all factors into that, as well as the financial part. And so when we make decisions on financial stuff, all those little things, they're all part of the whole picture, aren't they? If we really look at look at a balance wheel of our life, what are we trading for each one of those things? Our relationships. I mean, how many people are in relationships that maybe are not, I know this is based on getting wealthy, but even in relationships, if you're not in the right relationship, isn't that going to hinder how you can move forward in your financial freedom part too? So anyway, just thought about that just a second ago. So.
Actually, the wrong choice of partner is listed in one of the list of most common failures.
Yeah, that's right. I was just going to say that. We read that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
There is one more thing as well, which he says in the beginning of the chapter. It's about when making decisions is one of the important factors he's emphasizing here is the opinions of others. Most of the times, we say when we are making decisions that we get a lot of opinions from other people, and whereby, they get us swayed from making a proper decision. So, in order to come to a decisive decision, he mentions about newspapers and gossips and a lot of other things, which sway you from taking a definite decision. So that's a very, very good point. I thought about it. The second thing I think he mentions here is about the characteristics of people who want to put a smattering or a veer of knowledge to try to give an impression. He just says that about people who talk more than you listen, they deprive themselves of having many opportunities to accumulate useful knowledge. But you also disclose your plans and purpose to people who will take great delight in defeating you because they envy you. Which which you can see wisdom behind it, whereby you're in a group, which are all in harmony because they have got one a purpose behind it. So obviously there's no envy or anything like that. And third thing I've just seen is about the value of decisions depend upon the courage required to render them. So once you've made the decision, even though there's a lot of opinions around you, and you have listened to the comments of others as well, then you just take that decision and take the courage, and render them the great decisions which serve the foundation of civilization, which he says on line 105, were reached by assuming great risk, which often meant the possibility of death even, which I can understand the wisdom behind.
Good points.
Good point. Yeah, for sure.
Nicole, I'm just wondering, because you know Abraham Hicks, right? And they're more on, you know, like they're procrastination sometimes until everything's ready. And on line 317 it says no man should leave the room until the decision for such a Congress has been reached. But well, sometimes you're just not ready to make a decision, so
I think they'd made the decision to make a decision. You know, they had to make a decision, so.
Yeah, so that's different. Okay, get it.
There's one thing, he mentioned, I don't really understood that. He said, and tell the world that you intend to do, but first show it. So what does that mean? I don't know.
That means talk less and think more and do more. Like, if you want to, if you have a plan or if you have an idea, you do more before you talk. So instead of telling everybody what you're going to do, you do it first and then tell them.
Mm-hmm. To tell the world, okay. So don't open it up to the world then.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes with what he was saying about, be careful who you tell your plans to. You tell it to your mastermind group, but don't be telling everybody else. And I think we've heard other places where it was said, like, don't tell everybody what your dreams are, because they'll try and dissuade you because they don't want you moving ahead and leaving them behind.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe is like just adding on to that thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, not everyone has the belief system in you or in themselves that they can accomplish big things. So if we tell people, we may be dissuaded, like Cheryl said. So the saying, actions speak louder than words. So talk to your mastermind group, because they're in sympathy with you. They're going to encourage you, but don't go and tell those family and friends who don't have the awareness or the attitude to back you up.
It just reminded me of something that, I had read somewhere else that, was that if you tell other people, that it dissipates the power that you have. And so it kind of makes me think that that's more relative to like what it says in here, where, you kind of have to show something first in order to be able to have enough, energy and conviction with your decisions to not be swayed by other opinions. Same likeness, I would think.
Good point. Yeah, exactly.
I agree. I think it's really important to, sometimes we get excited about things and we start talking about it, and maybe that really isn't really our real basic person. Maybe it isn't really a burning desire, and we're getting things out there, or we're saying things, and then all of a sudden we change our minds or something. Maybe it just needs to be more. I mean, you really have to get that in deep inside of you, and when you really know that you know that you know,
yeah,
then there's never any turning back on it, and you will never be swayed by anybody else's opinion or their eyes glazing over when they look at you like, oh, not you again doing that, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, I've been kind of through that myself. It's like, oh my gosh, so I'm really careful who I tell, a lot of times people go, well, what are you doing now? And it's like, I'm really careful about who I'm, how far I go into conversation about certain things,
Yeah, I agree. I lost a few years ago somebody that I thought was a friend, but obviously she wasn't, because, when I would tell her my goals and dreams, I think she thought I was a lunatic, and finally she just stopped wanting to listen to me. So, I guess there's probably really no loss, because obviously she wasn't a supporter, or, wouldn't have been with me today, on this journey as well. But, like, it does happen that people, they think you're nuts. So there's no point to telling them.
And on the other hand, it's really nice to have someone to tell who knows
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, so that's why it's so awesome to have this group,
Exactly.
because we can tell each other those things and have support, rather than like somebody said, the eyes rolling back kind of.
Yeah, because we really do need that support, especially when we're mostly surrounded by people who are rolling their eyes at us.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Which are the most people out there.
Yeah. Well, what is it,
I think
96 or 97% of them?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
also think it's really good to be able to brainstorm with people that you're close to, like in a mastermind group where you can, like, where you're going, but you're like some of the action steps and stuff you're just not really sure of, and being able to run some of that stuff off is really helpful as well, because everybody's kind of on the same mindset anyway. We all have the same, we're studying the same things. We know what we're, kind of what we're talking about, but we can help each other that way. I think is really helpful.
Yeah, the encouragement, and then when you're surrounded by, or you don't have anybody that's around you that is learning the same kind of awareness, and gradually, you start to question yourself, unless you've got somebody to encourage you.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you're making a decision, as you say that you should make a decision very quickly, and if else you have to change it, then change the decisions slowly. Whereas people who have failed, without exception, if at all, they reach decisions very slowly and change these decisions very quickly and often.
Yeah, they don't really know what they want, do they?
Yeah, that's right.
And with the reaching decisions quickly, he also makes it known that we need to get all the facts as well, and the proper facts, not the hearsay facts. Get specialised knowledge, go to a professional if you need to, get all of the facts first, and then reach the decision and stick to it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they also use their intuition a lot. I mean, like when Napoleon Hill was asked by Andrew Carnegie to write the book and to research, he didn't have, much time. He just had a few seconds to either say yes or no.
He'd spent how long? 3 or 5 days and nights there with him, and he knew his reputation. So you could imagine yourself being in the richest man and the most respected man in the country's office for that period of time, and being asked to fulfill his biggest wish. It'd be pretty hard, but it would be something that you would know was real.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but there's a difference between having asked the question and giving him 5 days to answer, or to prepare him for something and ask the question and be able to give a decision within seconds.
Yeah, so that was a test, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And do you think that the people that are making decisions slowly and changing them quickly and often are maybe lacking self-confidence as well?
Definitely.
Not only, not having a definiteness of purpose, but also lacking self-confidence.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
It's just like planting a tree and then taking it down.
Yeah, it's not going to grow.
That's a good point. Yeah, good.
Yeah, which is silly.
Well, it's being so unsure. I guess being unsure of yourself. If you can't make decisions, you're afraid you're going to fail or you're going to make a mistake. And then you make the decision and then you change your mind. You're right. It's that fear.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's a fear of failure. Not lack of self-confidence, but a fear of failure too, right?
Yeah, well, he talks about that in here. Where was it?
Yeah, he talked in the beginning of the chapter, procrastination.
Yeah, and then in line 324, he said that in that room were 2 men immune to fear and blind to the possibility of failure, Hancock and Adams.
Right.
So they were major factors.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also Bob says we let ourselves dictate by results. So if somebody tried and tried and tried and kind of lost confidence in herself or himself, then it's kind of hard to, I tried this for me and I tried that and it didn't work for me. So we let our results kind of dictate us.
True, we do.
Excellent point.
He also mentions, at line this 43, it's a very good line. It just kind of summarizes everything, where he says, it will not be difficult to detect in the history of the Declaration of Independence at least 6 of these principles: desire, decision, faith, persistence, the mastermind, and the organized planning. Is just kind of summarizing everything in there, and that line that you need all these things to reach your definite purpose and goal.
Which line was that again, Zane? Sorry.
It is line 432. 432.
Yeah, that was a good summary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recap.
Yeah.
Of everything he was trying to tell us in there, in case we missed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it says, these laws are available to every person who has the faith and the courage to use them. So everyone has got these laws, but we just fail to understand them and then use them, for a higher purpose.
Yeah, and just after that, that summary there on line 435, you know how Napoleon Hill says you'll find the secret in every chapter?
Mm-hmm.
Right after that, he says, throughout this philosophy, you will find the suggestion that thought, backed by strong desire, has a tendency to transmute itself into its physical equivalent. That's just kind of just popped in there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think he's right. That's absolutely right, Nicole. You said that he's repeating those things now and then everywhere, in each and every chapter, just to give us that same message again and again, so that it is ingrained in our mind.
So, guys, what do you think the secret is?
I think it's a formula of quite a few different elements.
I once heard from a man who, from Jerry Hicks. I heard him say somewhere, I don't know where, but he said that the secret was that everything is vibration.
Well, I think that's what the movie was based upon, was that the vibration and the laws of attraction. But I think there's all the laws of nature have to be taken into consideration for success, right? Not just the vibration.
Yeah, but it starts by the law of vibration.
Well, the law of attraction starts by vibration, right? That's the basis of the law of attraction. But there's all the other laws as well, like the laws of polarity and transmutation and gestation and all of those laws.
Yeah, but what we're doing is vibrating. So if we wouldn't exist, the law of vibration wouldn't matter to us. But since we do exist, it's our primary, that's where we come from. That's what we send out. It's our vibration. So that's why it's important to us. Everything else responds to that. The other laws are still there, but it responds to our vibration. That's how I understand it.
I think it's awareness. I think that if we're aware of what we really are.
But some people are successful without knowing how it works.
That's right, and you just feel good, right?
Yeah.
So you got a point. Vibration. I think what happened is most of us don't know what we want because we come from employee mind, And awareness is important. So first of all, you must know what you want, and then match your frequency to that vibration. I think that's what it is.
That's what Einstein said too. What just matched the frequency.
Even Bob at the Science of Getting Rich, he said, if money is what you want, match your vibration. And I wrote that down, like, and I said, how? How do I match what I really want?
By visioneering, for example. I guess there are lots of ways. There are lots of techniques. Visioneering is one of them. Have you seen I think it's a new video of Sandy on visioneering.
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
There's another very good point, is mentioned in this chapter about indecision, where, he says indecision is a habit which usually begins in youth, and the habit takes on permanency as the youth goes through graded school system. So he's pointing out that, in the schooling system, we are not being taught about taking definite decisions, which actually results in, when you do go and find jobs or having a definite purpose or decision in life, you just not in a habit or not in a position to take that. So, children or people who have been going through ages through this educational system have not been in a habit of taking decisions for themselves, which obviously results in not being able to reach their goal. And he says that it takes the first place he finds because he's fallen into the habit of indecision. 98 out of every 100 people worked on wages today are in the position they hold because they lack the definites of decision to plan a definite position and the knowledge of how to choose an employer. And then on another line, he also says about economic freedom. He says on line 489, he says economic freedom, financial independence, riches, desires, businesses, and professional positions are not within the reach of the person who neglects or refuses to expect, plan, and demand these things. This person who desired riches in the same spirit as Samuel Adams desired freedom for the colonies Indians showed to accumulate wealth. That's a very good point.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah.
It's quite a strong point, isn't it?
Yeah. So you need to, other than, the 6 principles which he's mentioned before, you need to also have to expect it, once you made the decision, by neglecting the people who are around you, coming to a mastermind group, you've made a definite decision, then you need to expect it and plan it and then demand those things accordingly as well. That's really important to reach your definite goal.
You know, something that I was thinking of while we were reading that today is that this book was written back in the 1930s. It's 2015, and our educational system is even worse than it probably was back then. It just blows me away that, how many thousands and millions of people have read this book, and we just can't seem to get this across in our educational system. It's just amazing.
Well, because people don't want to think. They don't think for themselves. They don't choose to think for themselves. But I can feel like with the next generation, like with my children, they don't like taking orders. Like I remember I was a rebel. Like out of 30 plus cousins, I was known to be the one who wouldn't obey. I just didn't want. And my kids are even worse. I mean, better actually, but you know what I mean by worse. They just know what they want, and they know that they are, allowed to choose. Not just allowed, but they they know they can choose and that nobody else has a say on it. So this next generation is really strong.
And so I'm actually studying the different the generations. You have the baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, and the last generation is Generation Z. And they are very different, very different. They mostly don't get the employers don't understand them. So it's something the employers should work on. But what Hildy said, the next generation is very different.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I've heard like a lot of people in their 20s nowadays, a lot of older people than 20 are shaking their heads and thinking, what's going to happen to this generation? They just don't conform, they just don't listen, they just don't, you know.
Yeah, I'm Generation Y, and I don't get my grandparents either. So yeah.
Yeah, is that necessarily a bad thing that they don't listen? Maybe not.
No, that's a good thing, definitely.
I know, because
there's a shift going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Bringing out their own individuality that way. Can be.
But let's hope that they are curious enough to look into this awareness, and that would be the ultimate.
Oh, they are. They are.
They are?
Yeah.
Cool.
I can relate better to younger people than older.
I was just going to say something like, Hildy, your children are, because they're raised with you, and so you're teaching them that. But what about the other children that are, they might not be listening to adults, but they're listening to somebody perhaps, and that could be their peers, and their peers are being influenced by maybe their parents or their environment, which means it may not necessarily be a good thing. Like who's guiding them, because they're influenced by somebody, and it's not. Like my children, I'm teaching them about the power of having choice, and making their own decisions, and we can have conversations. Generally, if something happens to with my daughter and it's something at school, we can generally narrow things right down to a choice that she made. Like by the time we peel it back, it was the teacher's fault, it was somebody's fault, it was this, it was that. But by the time we peel back all the layers, it was a choice that she made to be in a certain place, or to whatever reason it was. And, genuinely, it could just be she just wasn't switched on for whatever reason. But we can narrow things down to a choice that she made, but we have a conversation about that. Another child will go home and is not having this conversation with maybe their parents or anybody else that's got the time to sit and listen to them. So therefore, they're being influenced and they're blaming, and they're making choices without having the insight, I suppose, to even look a little closer to home, or think about the decisions that they're actually making and the reasons why they're making the decisions, which means that the next generation coming up it's not necessarily going to be good. For those of us that have got children and the parents that are talking to their children and have a certain awareness, that's great. But what about the others?
I can feel the difference, because even though they have the parents and they don't want to listen to their parents, they pretend to be listening to the parents, but when they're outside, the parents don't have control over them, so they listen to their peers. So that's where my kids come in. And my kids are, actually leaders in their schools. Mm-hmm. So it's doing well to the other kids, that I'm teaching them what I'm teaching them.
I totally get that. What I'm thinking is, when your children are not there, like who's leading the others? Who is leading? Because what would be really great is if all children, and which is what somebody, and I don't know who was speaking at the time. We were talking about the school systems, and that's why it would be so great if certain things were taught in school, just these principles were taught in schools to encourage children to lead themselves, think for themselves, make conscious decisions for themselves, and that's not being taught. So when we've got children that are able to influence in a good way, that's great. But for the most part, I don't think that's what's really happening.
The problem is not every parent is awake. We know about this information, but not every parent know about it.
Exactly, and that's great. It's great for my children because I'm able to talk to them now that I've got the awareness. I didn't have it before, but I have always been very conscious of making sure that my children make decisions. I've just always been that way, fortunately, which is probably why it's easier for me to accept this or be open to this. But for others, it's the same cycle, isn't it? It's not,
But a lot of years ago, the kids will just stay quiet and just yes, teacher, and go home and just don't say anything. But now we know our rights. It's like you cannot tell us what to do, and we won't ask why. We will keep asking why, and we will keep asking questions. It's just we won't stay quiet. We will look for our rights.
Doesn't it go a bit beyond that as well, in the fact that they're still feeling like they're being judged based on their grades, based on, lots of other different factors that all influences how they feel about themselves and therefore the choices that they're going to make. I don't know. I wish I could just wave a magic wand and just change the way that the schools are and the children are being taught. It can't come quick enough for me.
I used to be a teacher, and I worked with kids that were high risk, like some of them were classified in those days as emotionally disturbed and so forth. And I will never forget this one kid that we were in this class, and we were talking basically about stuff like this and vocational education and decisions and all that kind of stuff. And he just said, I wish that my parents would have, given me boundaries and given me some discipline, because he says, I have none. I just do whatever I want, whenever I want. Nobody gives a dang. And then what happened was that he was actually in a motorcycle accident. He had somebody in the back riding with him, and this kid got killed. The kid that was riding with him, and it just totally, it was like, it just broke my heart. But it was, I'll never forget that conversation that he had. And I think as what I was seeing a lot of times with kids that come from, very dysfunctional homes with no real parents there, they're out there trying to make decisions based on their environment, what's going on in their environment and what their peers are saying. So I think this is something that we really need to be able to, as educators in school, we need to teach that. How do you make decisions? When we learn about the paradigm, like your results are a direct correlation to your habits and the thoughts that you've been thinking about ever since, your environment, since the time you were born. And all of that happens because of that way back a long time ago, but the paradigms. And I think if we could come into the school system and teach about decision making and teaching about paradigms, wouldn't that make a big difference? I mean, I think that would be just huge, because we look at our results. I mean, Bob talks about this all the time with kids with grades that are not good. They study really hard, then they get a good grade, and then they do it just to appease their parents and so forth, and then afterwards it's like they go right back to where they were, because it doesn't last. It's only a short temporary thing. So I think the parents make a huge difference in what happens, but not all kids have that ability. I mean, more and more so don't, you know.
No, because the parents are stressed for whatever reason as well. But also, I think I was a governor at school. The teachers aren't even able to be creative in their own rights anymore. Like, they don't have that freedom. They have a structure that they have to follow, like rigidly. Rigidly.
It's all in the movie Thrive. Have you seen that movie? Because it talks about how a few people, like a handful of people, have all the power. They control the banks and everything, and from up. Well, they control the government, and the government controls the schools, and the school controls the parents, and it all comes from people up there who don't want the people down there to awaken. So even though you cannot see the direct link that these few people had control over everybody, they were trying to do it through the parents, through the system. It's all in the movie Thrive. It's on YouTube if you're interested to see it.
Yeah, I know about it. I don't know about the movie, but I know about the whole shit.
Shit, yeah. Yeah, the movie's amazing. Sometimes, like, I watched it twice. Once I was really awakened, and another time I was, like, really angry.
Yeah.
I've got mixed feelings about these things sometimes.
Hildy, what film is that?
Thrive.
Thrive. Oh.
On YouTube.
Thrive. Oh, Thrive. Oh, okay.
But that kind of makes me think of something in one of the chapters on the science of getting rich, where Wallace Waddle says, don't be wasting your time wishing that there wasn't the people in political power and all that kind of stuff, because the thinking that the universal mind has them there for a purpose, and when they're not needed anymore, they will be done away with.
That's right, and no one can take anything that's rightfully yours, so there is no body that can dominate the abundance.
That's a good point, is the fact that also that if you're focusing on putting your energy, more of your energies being of what it is you're resisting or don't want, then what you really want isn't going to have enough fuel behind it, because it's being used up for what you don't want. That makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point.
And I guess the people who are just going about their business and not really thinking about what they want and just going day to day and using their environment to direct them are probably likely being used for the bidding of those who are purposefully thinking. And quite often it would be to their own benefit as well. But maybe those governing bodies who are keeping enlightenment a secret feel that if they give them the power to their own enlightenment, they won't have all these bodies running around doing their bidding for them.
Yeah, I think that was their fear, because I heard that before in China, they used to give the employees or the workers, the factory workers, opium just to make sure that they won't start thinking and breaking out of the system.
Oh my goodness, that's scary.
There's all sorts of theories around that. Even some people say fluoride is another one.
Well, it's actually still going on with us. I mean, like in our countries, like there's medicine for this and for that, and they give like kids, the brand of what's that, ADAS or something like that, and they, you know what I mean?
Ritalin.
Yeah. Addiction.
Yeah. Well, they give the kids labels just because they can't sit down and concentrate.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
ADHD.
Yeah, exactly. And then they get, they get medication just to sit still, etc.
Yeah, instead of trying to figure out how the child will learn best, instead of working with the child with the way they learn.
Yeah. Guys, sorry, I gotta go. You guys have fun.
It's wonderful.
I'm happy to finish up there if everyone, unless anyone has any more points I'd like to bring up.
Yeah, no, that's
Awesome
good.
call.
I'm pretty done. We're pretty done. We're done.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.